Carol is the BLM state botanist. She has been working on our Colorado native plants and helping to teach people for many decades. She and her associate, Bill Crenning, have produced this Recognizing Plant Families of the West publication through their government work. And it is quite the resource. And I welcome you, Carol. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, well, thank you for inviting me. And I'm really producing a book like this has been kind of a dream of something I've wanted to do ever since I became a public servant for the federal government. So basically, what I do, I am the botanist for the Bureau of Land Management here in Colorado. But there are two programs that I am in charge of. One is the Threatened and Endangered Species Program. So most of my work is really working to do trend monitoring about our rarest plants that occur on BLM land. So I work a lot with the Fish and Wildlife Service and others to lead listed species towards recovery and eventual removal from the list of listed species, but covered under the Endangered Species Act. But that will be a lifelong job because it's incredibly a very slow process because we need to have lots of data. And so far, there will be two in the 25 years that I've been working at the Bureau of Land Management that possibly will be delisted. And then the second part of what I do is really the Native Plant Materials Program. So we have a national seed strategy, and the idea behind all of this, in just a very short version, is that we're going to develop new cultivars, if you will, that are not really cultivars. It's all natural track. We're controlling the genetics, but things to use for restoration. It is a tough process. There's lots of material available for folks to use and after wildfires and things like that. But we're really interested, if you will, in putting the right seed in the right place at the right time. And in other words, trying to solve how local is local. And with that, I have numerous graduate students working with the University of Northern Colorado and University of Colorado at Denver, Denver Botanic Gardens, and others in trying to determine how local is local. And so we're doing a lot of common garden studies to see if what we plant actually survives and where we go from there. So I think that's pretty much enough. I've been, running around in Colorado looking at plants for a very long time. And so, again, I just want people to really enjoy our native flora and be happy. And so we wrote this book because we hire lots of interns and seasonal kids. And, they come out here and they're collecting data for us, but what's the problem? They've never seen the flora. They may never have had a taxonomy class in their lives. And what happens when you go to the beautiful Flora of Colorado by Jennifer Ackerfield? It is a terrific, wonderful, clear-cut flora. It's my favorite. But what happens? You go to the family key first, right? And what happens? People make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes because going through a family key is difficult, especially if you haven't had any training, even, and when you get to the family, you don't really know if you're right or wrong. So we developed this to let people sort of jump right to the plant family, we hope. And we have all the characters and lots of photos so that at least if you get to the plant family, you can immediately use the flora to go to the plant family. And I think you have a much better chance of success. So that's the genesis behind why we produce this. I only have 54 plant families in it. We're going to try to do another edition, and I'll talk more about that at the end of the workshop here, but we felt like 54, we're trying to cover BLM land across the West. So we manage 245 million acres. So there's lots of plant families. So we tried to choose plant families that a lot of people would encounter. All right. So, any questions before I start? And Maggie and folks, I know I'll be looking at the chat because I can't see that. But does anybody have any question right now? And then we'll move on.
Carol, just before you start, remember to press like send or whatever so it goes full screen.
Okay. I need to hit what slideshow? Yeah. Okay, because I don't, okay. How is it full screen yet? What do I have to, okay, what was that again before I screw up?
Yeah, we did this yesterday. I think, yeah, you click slideshow.
Yep, I'm clicking slideshow. Okay. And then are you guys, okay, are you full screen?
Not yet.
Okay, okay. I just went full screen. So, okay.
Yeah, I think it's okay. I don't know why it didn't pop out.
Okay, all right. Let me
Oh,
go to okay.
here someone is saying in the chat, go in the lower right to the presentation mode podium in the lower right, that little icon next to the Zoom bar.
Next to this, okay, is that hold on, let me make sure I've got. All right, let's see if this does it. Is this doing anything? Is that good? Whoops. You got it?
You may have to change the session that you're sharing to the one that is full screen.
Okay, I'm trying to find that. I'm not, okay.
So that would be go to share screen again and like
Yep.
choose your panel again.
Okay, let me go. Okay, hold on. Okay. Let me go back here. Something just. Okay, let's go back. I'm trying to get there, folks. Why is it not? Oh, geez, we were perfect yesterday. What the heck?
Oh, no worries, just take your time. It's no problem.
Okay.
Strangely, it looks like, yeah, your cursor for us is just floating around the image. But if you go to your Zoom frame and go back to the green share screen button.
Okay, let me try to get to the Zoom frame. I gotta close this. Oh. Okay, why am I not getting to my Zoom frame? Gosh. Okay, done. And we're gonna go back to the, okay, hold on, I might be almost there, guys. Okay, got it. Okay, I'm here on the Zoom, and now we're gonna do this. Okay, let's see if I got this. For Pete's sakes. Okay. I'm trying again here.
Oh, there you go. There you go. You clicked it. So just say from beginning on the far left.
Got it. Okay. Okie doke. Okie doke. Are we good?
Awesome.
Okay, sorry for the delay, folks.
We'll cut that out of the recording. Don't worry.
Yeah, this is what happens when you have an old person at the controls, right? Okay, so
one quick question was, how many plant families are there in Colorado?
Oh my God, how many plant families? Let's see if we check.
And someone said per acre field 142.
Yeah, I think that's correct. Yes.
Okay.
So obviously I tried to pick the ones that when you're out and about, especially in sagebrush, the sagebrush biome, we want, our folks are working in those. And so, yeah. Did this thing just go off weird? Okay. Okay. Are you guys still there?
We are here. It
Okay,
looks like
good.
you just slid your cursor across it or something.
Yeah. Okay,
There
now
you
we're
go.
good. Okay, here we go. All right, so let's start with the beginning. In order to use this book and to use any key, everybody needs to review the general parts of a flower. And this is something that I remember doing when I was a little kid, and probably in second grade is when I first looked at the parts of a flower, and we had to draw the parts of a flower, as I recall, way back when. So this is what we're looking at. The main thing here that we want to pay attention to is the receptacle, all flower parts attached to the receptacle. And that is super important in identifying plant families. And what we're looking at is the position of the ovary in regards to the other flower parts as they attach to the receptacle. And that's super, super important and makes a lot of what you do very simple. So we have some terminology. If we take the sepals, those are the sepals, of course, protect the flower and bud. Collectively, they're the calyx. All the petals collectively are the corolla. Calyx and corolla means perianth. The structure of the pistil, or you can use the term carpel, is stigma, style, and ovary. Ovary obviously is the spot where the seeds are, and then stamens are anther and filament. So all of these terms are going to pop up in keys. But what we really, really, really want to pay attention to, again, is the ovary position. And most floras, I would say, refer to ovary position. A lot of people don't like dealing with that, but it's really simple once you get the hang of it. So let's take a look at what I'm talking about here. There's two kinds of ovaries. There are superior and inferior. So what does that mean? And think in your heads about a artichoke for a minute. When you're going to eat your artichoke, you've peeled off all the outer bracts, and now you're down to the heart of the artichoke. So you're going to scrape off all of that fuzz, which are all the individual flowers, right? So that big fat or big broad disc that you're going to eat, the heart of the artichoke, is of course a receptacle. So if you think about that big flat receptacle and you just scraped off all the fuzz, you had a bunch of flowers with ovaries sitting on top of that thing. So in a flower, if you look at that ovary, and then you've got your stamens, and the stalk of the stamen goes up what appears to be under the ovary. And if the petals and the sepals all appear to be under the ovary, so the ovary looks like it's sitting on top of the point of attachment of the other flower parts, we're going to call that a superior ovary. So that is really common in the rose family and lots of other things. But just think about that for a minute. Now, if we move over to another type of superior ovary where you have a cup. So in other words, you have a teacup. And what happens with the teacup is that the stalks of the stamens, the petals, and the sepals all attach to the rim of that cup. And essentially, that cup goes below the ovary. So we would call that a perigynous flower, and that can also be found in the rose family because the ovary is sitting on top of the teacup, which has the other parts attached to it. Now, if we move over to an inferior ovary, think of an orchid. What it looks like now is you still have that hypanthium and we'll go through many examples of plants that have inferior ovaries here today, but it looks like all the other floral parts are attached to the top of your teacup or involucre, whatever you want to call it. And the ovary seems to be sunken below. So that's inferior. So those are the two basic types. And once you get the hang of looking at that in the flower, boom, it's going to be pretty simple. But that's what I'm talking about there. All right. We also pay attention a lot to floral symmetry. We would use the term actinomorphic or radial symmetry for flowers that you could cut through the middle and get a series of mirror images, everything the same. But the reverse of that is bilateral or zygomorphic symmetry. And those are, again, as an example, an orchid. You can only cut it in half in one plane to get two mirror images. So that's another thing that's going to pop up in Floral Keys, and it's going to help you with questions in when you get to the plant family and you're going through the couplets, they might mention this type of symmetry. So you want to pay attention to those. All right, inflorescence types. That's another thing. Groupings of flowers. Of course, groupings of flowers are an inflorescence, and there's many types. And we're looking at here on the screen, raceme, spikes, corms, and simple umbels. All of those things have what in common? What they have in common is this little stalk, which is holding up the flower. The only one that does not is a spike. So again, you're going to be asked in the keys what type of inflorescence you have, and some plant families are going to be recognized by the type of inflorescence that they have. So a raceme is pretty common. Let's say if you're looking at penstemons. Spikes are common in some of the orchids and a bunch of other things that have multiple flowers. Simple umbels, onions, little alliums out there. Those are simple umbels. What's the difference? The pedicels or the stalks of those little flowers all radiate from a central point, and they're roughly the same length, so they make a ball-like inflorescence. All right, let's go on to some of the others. We have compound umbels here. Compound umbels are characteristic of the parsley family. Panicles, a much branched inflorescence, are going to be common in the grasses. And then there's simple cymes and compound cymes. So that's just some basic terminology. And again, in the back of the book, we do have a glossary, so you can have a look at all these terms. But anyhow, those are the things you're going to pay attention to. So some groups, like, as I said, the parsley family, if you hear the word compound umbel, if you see a compound umbel, you don't even have to guess what plant family that's in. All right. We have a little bit more of a challenge in the Asteraceae. A lot of people don't like the darn yellow composites, as some folks say. But again, here's that big...
Carol, I'm sorry
Yes.
to interrupt, but this is a transition in what you're saying. Could you speak to the evolutionary advantages of having different forms that you just described?
Well, I think the advantage, some of those things would be for wind pollinated things. Having a panicle, it gives you, gives grasses a chance to take over the earth, right? There is a bit of an advantage if you have, I would say, racemes, because your insect pollinators are, that would be something I think that would be fantastic. But I think I'm not sure I'm thinking about this. I guess having multi-flowers just in a large inflorescence is an advantage, because you have an opportunity to have each one with pollinators giving you the advantage to produce more seed. I don't know if that's what you had in mind, but I would still say, just as having a giant panicle, to me, grasses have the best advantage of all. I don't know if that makes any sense.
That makes perfect sense. Thank you very much.
Okay. All right. So let's go back to the asters. So again, what we're looking at here, you can already guess that the ovary is what? What is the position of the ovary? It's inferior in the composites, right? Because you can see the ovaries are sitting on that receptacle, and all the other flower parts are going to be above, attached to what looks like the top of the ovary. So I just wanted to include that diagram just to break down, because we have a little bit of a change up in terminology here, the pappus is now the calyx, if you will, and you're going to have to pay a lot of attention to the pappus in the aster family. All right. Some other things that we're going to pay attention to when you're just looking at a basic key are leaf margins. That's not always obviously the first thing that's going to come up, but if a key says to you the leaf margin is entire, what does that mean? It's a featureless leaf margin. The other things to pay attention to are the terms lobed and parted, and that just simply means how deeply cleft the leaf is cut as you get towards the midrib. So those are things that are useful and you might find in a key. Compound leaves versus simple leaves. Obviously, compound leaves are divided into segments. And the thing to remember is, how do I know it's a compound leaf? You're looking for the position of the bud. So all of these, you note that the bud is at the base of the petiole. So that tells you that this is a compound leaf. So palmate leaves, looks like all the leaflets, if you will, are coming from a central point. Trifoliolate is the term for 3 leaflets. And you can have, of course, odd pinnate or even pinnate. The obvious difference is that odd pinnate has a leaflet at the tip. And the thing to remember is certain plant families, like the bean family, if you will, is going to have everything is compound leaves, and there may be questions involved in the type of compound leaves. All right. The other thing that we really want to pay attention to, and these will be big clues for certain plant families, and as we roll through this, if you can just start remembering what families have opposite leaves versus alternate or whorled, this is going to be super important. And opposite leaves, obviously the leaves are opposite each other, attached on the stem at the node. Alternate, they alternate in the whorled. In a whorled situation, there's 3 or more leaves attached to the stem at the node. Now, opposite leaves, big clue. And we can break down a lot of plant families that have opposite leaves and other characters. So again, for quick field ID, if you can have a look at that, remember that you're miles ahead. All right, so let's look at the plant families keys that I put in this book. And I did not do a key like Jennifer might have done to actually, this is a very general key that you can use to get to a group of plant families, and then you'll have choices from there. The next edition I'm working on now, breaking down the plant families within the key so that you see like whose group that has opposite leaves, who has this, who has that. So this is a simple key, and many of you have probably dealt with this as you were going through school in the past. But if we look at the monocots, we're going to have either grasses and grass-like plants in this group, or we're going to have flowers like tulips or agaves or yuccas or lilies. Okay, so this is an example of large grouping of plant families that have parts in 3s or multiples of 3s. We also have that term in there, the perianth. So the perianth is your calyx and corolla that are called tepals. So think of a tulip again. You can't tell the difference one from the other. Yes, other, thing you should be able to tell by position where they're attached. The calyx would be outermost, but heck, you can't really tell because they all look the same. The other thing with monocots is that the leaves have parallel venation and they're mostly strap shaped. So to use this book, you would look at the family, and if it's a grass, it's going to be over in the grasses and grass-like plants. But if it looks like it's got tepals, parts, and 3s, here's the choices of the families that are in this book, and then you'll have a superior ovary or an inferior ovary. So it's just giving you choices. Where do I go? All right, then with the dicots, or now as we call them, the eudicots, we have flower parts in 4s or 5s. or multiples of 4s and 5s. And we do have recognizable sepals and petals or calyx and corolla. And we have, of course, the major leaf veins are reticulated. And then to break it down, and you think, oh my gosh, why does she have all this stuff? Well, it's just, again, remember, these are folks. You may not have a lot of experience doing this. So you're out and about, you're seeing, you're just looking at this plant and, all right. So it looks to me like I've got something that has petal-like structures and they look like they're separate. Nothing's fused here. So here's a giant list of plant families that you could look at. The other one is if you have flowers that where the structures are clearly fused to each other, you could have a long or a short tube like a penstemon flower. Well, are they radially symmetric, the term actinomorphic, or are they more tubular, bilaterally symmetric? So we'd use the term zygomorphic. So again, this is just a quick look, and I know it looks complicated, but it's pretty slick if once you just do that. And again, I saw a key similar to this when I was in South Africa a couple of years ago. I was at Kirstenbosch Botanic Garden, and that's kind of what inspired me to they had written a book for the plants of South Africa, and they had done a very general key like this. And I thought, hey, I like that. So that's where I got that. And hopefully we're going to improve upon that in our next edition, but we've got a ways to go on that. Okay, and then this is just a quick look at color-coded plant families by alphabetically arranged. Okay, so now here's where the rubber meets the road. And again, I have used a lot of terminology that is somewhat new. So I'm following Q with the combinations of some of the plant families based on, of course, genetics and new information. So there may be some name changes in here from things that we might have thought 10 years ago, but I'll bring them out. And if you use SciNet at all, which is southwestbiodiversity.org, they are following the same taxonomy. So we wanted to have everything as up to date or as possible. So,
hey, Carol.
Yes.
One question. Why did they change the name from dicot to eudicot?
That I don't know. Do you? I seriously, I don't. I don't know, and I should know that, but I do not know.
Did they discover plants that have more than 2 seed leaves? That was because you mean many, right?
Yeah. I mean, maybe. I will actually make a note of looking into that so we get the true answer.
Thank you.
Yeah, sorry.
Oh, Elizabeth Wu. Elizabeth said phylogenetics and evolutionary relationships drove the name change.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense.
Yeah. Basically, dicots became a polyphyletic group, and the eudicots tucked in there as, I think, the true monophyletic group. Sorry, that's not a great explanation. I don't really remember.
No, that sounds reasonable. I should have known that. I just thought to myself, and I realized when I was doing this, nobody's going to use the term dicot, so I better get on board. All right. So let's have a look at the elder family. Plants that you're probably familiar in there are Sambucus and Viburnum. What are some of the characters? Now here's something, and again, what I'm doing is I'm creating charts of the flowering plant family recognition characters and key diagnostic features. So one thing that I would put on a chart would be leaves opposite, generally twos. That's a big deal. When you're looking at this shrub, ovary inferior, that's another thing that I would make sure I've got on that list. And then finally the fruits, which would be the drupe. So they're like a date, right? Fleshy fruits that drupes are the exocarp, or the outer layer of skin of that fruit, and the next second layer, which is called a mesocarp. They're very fleshy, but you have like a hard seed in the center. So if you think of peaches, plums, olive, dates, they're all drupes. So those are the big recognition characters for that plant family. And we see sambucus, compound leaves. Okay, Amaranthaceae, pigweed and goosefoot families. Now this is where we've had some changes. Chenopods and amaranths have always been separate families, but there was always the rumor that things would change based on genetics, and of course they have. They have very similar characters. They're very closely related, and they're very important families. Atriplex, of course, is food for many species, and the Krashenicovia, or winter fat, is something that the BLM would plant on the landscape because it is food for animals in the grazing animals in the winter. And I would say that a lot of people think that there are a lot of weedy things in that family, and a lot of folks, unfortunately, in the BLM may not look kindly on Atriplex, but saltbush is super important. And of course, they're common in arid or saline environments in the West. But anyhow, very important forage for wildlife. Okay, so what are the alternating characteristics? Leaves alternate or opposite. What I would, in my head, I would say that they're ugly flowers because we don't have any petals, and that makes it's just like these little green things. So petals definitely are absent. We have superior ovaries, and the fruits are a little bit different. Fruits are utricles in the amaranth. So we're looking at the subfamily Amaranthaceae right here. And then if we take a look at what is a utricle is really a bladdery akene. Okay, so the outer layer is somewhat loose. So anyhow, let's go over to chenopods, and here's just an example of the nondescript flowers, but you can see the fruits. And then the chenopods, again, what's interesting about Atriplex, which would have been in Chaetopodiaceae, is we often have a leaf surface that is somewhat scurfy. So scurfy means it looks like dandruff on its stems. Can be fleshy, and yes, a lot of the invasive ones have very fleshy stems. And the flowers are either unisexual or bisexual. In this case, they're tiny, inconspicuous, and again, petals are absent. And when it says sepals, if they occur, are scarious. That means we have a clear margin on the edge. Ovaries superior, and again, the fruits are achenes or utricles. So very little difference between the two subfamilies here. And an achene is just a dry, indehiscent one-seeded fruit. Okay, so here's again, you can see in the top the scurfy leaf surface for Atriplex. And again, Atriplex, super important out there in the community. And then here's a baddie, Heligeton, and those things unfortunately show up on BLM land where things have not been managed very well. So this is a huge problem across the West. And winter fat. Winter fat is one of the species that it routinely planted. We'd like to, of course, have communities that have survived that have a lot of winter fat, but often we have to augment some of our restorations with winter fat. All right, lily family, or excuse me, amaryllis.
Hey, Carol.
Yeah.
Okay, so how about we just take a pause between each family, and then if there's a question addressing that family, we'll hit it. So like one question is, why the bias against Atriplex?
Because if you're a person in the range program, gosh, and please, folks, these are my own thoughts, so don't ever repeat them to other range people in the BLM, it's a salt, it's like, well, it's got some spines. They don't eat that. That's the bias. It's not what we would call an ice cream plant, if you will. Winter fat, yup, because there's nothing there. And of course, antelope and a lot of other wildlife species desperately need winter fat. But the bias against Atriplex is that it isn't, it's got, especially the ones, Atriplex convertifolia has spines. And so we would probably try to remove it. I mean, they're going to leave it, but they would prefer not to have it in the way in some areas. And remember the old treatments, people would chain the landscape and rip out all the shrubs, and then we would replace them with grasses, the cultivars of grasses. So that's the bias. It's a cool plant in my mind, one of my favorite plants. But if you are in the invasive weed program within the Bureau, you would probably be looking at how to remove Atriplex. Is that okay?
That's great. Thank you.
All right. Let's take a look at the Amaryllis family. What's our favorite? It used to be Alliaceae, right? We've got our little wonderful onions, but now we are in the Amaryllis family. Okay, so these are pretty simple plants to identify, but what is important here for our little onions, our native onions, is that you're going to have to, unfortunately, dig up the plant to look at the bulb. The fleshy bulb has outer coats that are going to tell you which species you're dealing with. Again, it's a monocot. Inflorescence is an umbel, so we have a couple of bracts that are right below the umbel, and then they are scapose, so that means it occurs, the inflorescence pops up on a leafless flowering stem. Again, as a monocot, if you look at the flowers, all the little tepal, all 6 parts, because we're parts in 3s, are the same. So we would call them tepals. We have a superior ovary and a loculicidal capsule, which means that the several pistils have come to several ovaries have come together, fused to form the capsule, and they're going to split into the locule to release the seeds. Pretty simple to recognize the onions, and they are now we are calling them subfamily Alioideae, because they are now a subfamily within the Amaryllis family. And any questions on that? They're all pretty simple to recognize, I think, on the landscape. The main thing is, if you really want to know what it is, you're going to have to dig up to get to that outer bulb coat. So again, here's just some of the characters. We generally have 6 tepals, and you can see in the upper one, you can see the ovary there, and you notice that we've got 3. And let's see, the fruit, again, will split open, as you can see, into the locule. So we have 3 carpels or pistils up there fused to form the ovary, and now we're going to split open. And again, with the flowers, all petals, if you will, look the same. We use the term tepals. This is the nodding onion. All right, any questions on onions?
No questions.
Okay, how about the cashew or the sumac family? Everybody's favorite, of course, is poison ivy, maybe. And then, of course, we have rhus, which is the sumac, which is which is all over our landscape, and a really cool shrub. Remember that mangoes are in this family, as well as poison ivy. So it's interesting. I have met some folks over the course of looking at plants that actually cannot eat cashews or mangoes because they have contact dermatitis, which I never would have thought that. And this we have two subfamilies. So what used to be the cashew family, we now have it as a subfamily. So let's take a look at the characters again. They're woody trees. We often have resinous bark, so that's something you might have um, a particular odor, and also they're very sticky. So those of you who have worked with Rhus trilobata, which is our native out here in the foothills all over the state, you will feel everything's really sticky. And I've had to collect seeds of that for our national seed program, and boy, they are super sticky. Ovary is superior in here. Fruit is again a drupe, so it's like a date, and it will be very simple to recognize. The three-leaf, you can call it three-leaf sumac if you want, but that is, I think, is an easily recognized plant in the cashew family. All right, can we move? Okay. And of course, here's poison ivy, which is interesting. I'm sure as a kid, everybody says if the leaves are three, let it be. But it's interesting to me coming from the East. And I grew up in New Jersey, and I couldn't hardly go outside. I was covered with poison ivy because I did a lot of volunteer work as a kid at an arboretum, and just running around, I had poison ivy. It was bad, bad, bad. And eventually I had to go through a series of shots that they thought would make me resistant to poison ivy. But it's very odd that moving then out west to go to graduate school and other things, I could walk through a grotto of poison ivy out here and nothing happens. So I've really found that fascinating. I don't know why, but here in the West, and I don't know if other folks have had that sort of experience, but it doesn't bother me at all. It's just really weird. So anyhow, couple of this again, a pretty easy family to kind of recognize. All right. Any questions? All right, this is one of my favorite families, the parsley family. And what's the first thing that you notice? It has a compound umbel, right? That is, so you don't have to go much farther on this one. If you see that compound umbel, golly, you know it's the Apiaceae, and you just shoot right to the Apiaceae family in the flora. What was the old name of the family? The old name of the family was Umbelliferae. What does that mean? Bearer of umbels. And in this case, we have a compound umbel. And that, again, is one of the large, that is a huge diagnostic character for this plant family. The other thing is the sheathing petiole. So if you're thinking about celery, right? When you have your celery and you're going to pull it apart and you're going to chop off the end of the stem, because it's kind of woody as you're pulling those leaves, the stems off your celery that you just purchased from the store. So that is an example of a sheathing petiole. So the base of the leaf, which is what you're pulling off, wraps around the stem. And that is an enormous clue for things in the Apiaceae. The other is that there are, the stems are ribbed and they have hollow internodes, which means they could be used as pea shooters. However, as you remember, Socrates had a bit of a dust up with a plant in this family. You would not want to use these because they are indeed poisonous. So just think about poison hemlock and others. Poison hemlock, of course, is all over the foothills out here. So if you're out and about through some of the open space parks, you'll come to areas where there are these large plants with compound umbels that have purple spots on the stems. Those are your poison hemlock. So Conium maculatum, you don't really want to be chewing on that. Let's put it that way. Plant family has parts in fives. We also have interesting fruits, which are called schizocarp. So if you think of rye bread that has the little seeds in it, those are the 1/2 of a schizocarp, and so they are called mericarps. But that, you know, it's a dry fruit that splits into 2 pieces. And again, the ovaries are inferior, and they do have the styles come together on top of the ovary, and they have a little bit of a fleshy base. So you can see that with a hand lens when you look into the big flowers like cow, parsnip, or something like that. So again, here's just a look at the inflorescence. We've got that compound umbel. So what that means is that stalk there is what we would term a peduncle. Out of at the apex of that stalk comes all these rays, and then they're going to go up into the actual clusters of flowers that have their own little petioles and all that. So that is a compound umbel. And then the fruits at top, you can see those are the schizocarps, and those are going to split into 2 pieces. So as it's shed, there'll be, you know, each one of those will drop as 2 parts. Okay, and here's an example of the stylopodium. So you can see the styles, and then we've got this white fleshy base, and they're fused sitting on top of the ovary. So this is really cool. And again, if you're out and about, a big flower like cow parsnip, you can easily see the stylopodiums with your hand lens. That's another clue. If you see that, shoot, heck, I know, I'm in the parsley family. The sheathing petiole, here's an example. And you can see how that is wrapping around the stem. And also many of the parsleys have finely dissected leaves. They're kind of fern-like, but that sheathing petiole, again, enormous clue for the parsley family. We will have another family that has a sheathing petiole. That'll be the buttercup family. We'll get down there later on. But anyhow, this is a huge, huge clue. And again, be careful because we have water hemlock in this family, which will cause convulsions. That is very deadly. So that's another plant to avoid. And you can see with this angelica that I just moved to on the lower, you see that you can see that sheathing petiole on the wrapping around that stem, holding up those leaves to the left there. So big, big clue for parsley family. And in the spring, it's always fabulous. I really like Cymopteris bulbosus. So it's one of the things. This was a really super year for Cymopteris bulbosus. So it was really cool to go out there and see all these little guys flowering away. Anybody have any questions about parsley?
Yes, there are parsley questions.
Okay.
Is there nothing else in this part of the world that has compound umbels? And is there anything in this family that simply has an umbel, not compound?
No, yes, there may be other things, but I would say in this family, compound umbel is what you're going to see. And other plant families in the West, I'm going to take a stab and say I don't think there are other plant families that have compound umbels. I'm just trying to think. Shucks, I think we can be safe and say this is the family. I'm trying to think of anything else that has umbel-like things. You know, we've got the milkweeds in a pot, but they're not compound umbels. They are not structured at all like this. So I'm going to say that is unique to this family around the world. But I mean, in the West, absolutely. Okay.
All right, thank you.
Sure. Okay, this is the milkweed family. And one of the things to note is for years, we had dogbanes and milkweeds, which have been genus Asclepias or Asclepias, however you would like to say it. And for years, they were going to combine them. And now, based on genetics, they are indeed combined. And this is so they have chosen to use Aposinaceae. Now, there are going to be definite differences in the flower structure, but they have other characters that are very similar in their fruits and other things. So we are now combined into one plant family. All right. And if you're a home, you might grow Hoyas if you're have succulents at home. And that, of course, is in this plant family. Plants that we would use just out there gardening would be Amsonias and maybe milkweeds. Big push to grow milkweeds on the landscape because the monarch butterfly, they're going to be making a decision very soon. Well, soon in Fish and Wildlife terms is a few years probably, but the monarch may be listed as endangered by the Fish and Wildlife Service. And there is a national effort. I was just on a call about this last week about how we would create habitat for monarchs, and that would require planting milkweed to bolster populations on the landscape. Colorado is not part of the main flyway, but we could actually help in doing that. And there are conflicts with the horticulture industry with some of the tropical milkweeds that are sold for sale that are not monarch food. And I was totally unaware of that. So I'll be getting, we, the BLM, will be getting more involved in what we can do to help the monarch survive. And again, that some people are not do not enjoy seeing milkweeds on the landscape. And so we're going to have to really have a hard look at some of these invasive species programs where, they're not listed as invasive. They are not designated as noxious weeds by federal statute, but people do remove them. So we're going to have some things we have to really think about and for the better for the monarch. So what are some of the characteristics that are similar in this family? Both dogbanes and milkweeds have milky latex. It can be watery, but mostly milky. Petals on both are often overlapping and twisted in bud. We have two very different floral structures. So in the milkweed, we're going to have a column called a gynostegium. We've got this filament column that are really the stamens and the pistils have fused together to form this column, which the other flower parts attach to. We do not have that structure in a dogbane. So that's one thing that you'll be able to see it immediately, but that's the difference. Pollen for both, they're a mass, and so and it's called pollinias, and you can pull those out of a milkweed flower with a pin. I've done that many a time, which is kind of interesting. So it's just pollen is packed into this little mass. It kind of looks like earwax, if you will. And then the fruits are follicles, so they're going to split open on one side to release seeds, as you know, that have hairs, silky hairs, so they're for wind dispersal. So here's a look at the milkweed. And you can see here that there's obviously on the stem, we have cut it to reveal the milky sap. Here's the follicle opening, and the seeds, of course, have those silky hairs. And then you're looking at the flower. One of the things you're looking at now are the column, and you can see that there are the petals. The sepals would be reflects downward. You can't see them, but we have the accessory parts here, the corona, and some other things. But that is a classic milkweed flower, easy to recognize, versus the flower in a dogbane, which is not structured at all. But look at the follicles here, same thing. So they're just they're long and skinny versus a more plump fruit in the milkweed itself. So that's a somewhat of a new combination. This is one I have not seen in the wild, but this is a cool little milkweed. All right, any questions on milkweeds? Easy to recognize.
There is a question here. Which Asclepias species do monarch prefer?
Well, I would just say speciosa as the first one, the common milkweed. That's what I would start with. But I think any I think any milkweed would be wonderful. But that one is probably the most common out here. So I think they would also, the orange one, tuberosa, would be another one I think that they would really jump on. But I would say the big giant speciosa, which is the showy milkweed or the common milkweed, would be a favorite because, there are many, many more occurrences of that on the landscape in the West. But all of our other little guys, some are going to be way too small, but a lot of the other ones that you might have seen, I've seen milkweeds up in where was I? Bull Mountain, and I did see a monarch up in there, and that was speciosa, though I'm trying to remember, but I think mostly speciosa. So showy milkweed, common milkweed, big deal. But the others are good if they find them. And I know I think their seeds of that are pretty available for folks to grow, or you can buy. I know Prairie Moon sells lots of these native milkweeds for planting in gardens.
And then could you repeat the part about the earwax? So
Yeah,
you put a pin in the pollen ball and
yes, let me go. Okay, let me try to go backwards here. So when I look at the column, and boy, I wish I had a pointer here, but if I've gone to the upper in the right hand, I've got a flower open here, and you can see the column, and there's a sort of a central flower at the top, and there's this funky little slit. So if you were out in the field, and if we ever all get to go together in the field, we grab that milkweed flower, and I just take a little pin or my tiny pen knife, my tiny little, and I put it in that slit. And that slit is, of course, where the honeybee, or, well, it's always a honeybee, darn it, but we have plenty of native bees, but the honeybees seem to get there first. They stick their leg in there, and when they pull that leg out, there's going to be the bags of pollen, if you will. So what you have is they're going to pull it out, and you have these two little black, it looks like a coffee bean with two little arms, and on each side of these arms you have a bag of waxy pollen. So it looks literally like earwax. And what happens, so it comes out on the bee's leg, and you can do this too. And then when she goes to the next flower, of course, part of it's going to twist off and break into the next slot that she's placed her foot in, or her leg in, and that's how pollination happens. So, you guys can just grab your milkweed, and you'll see at the top of the column, you'll see those little slits, and then and if there's still a little black thing that looks like a coffee bean above the slit, just slip a pin in there and gently pull it out, and you'll have two bags of pollen. It's kind of cool. Yeah. So I guess so we'll have to try, Maggie, maybe we should have a
I know.
Oh, yeah,
That's
we should have a work.
there's one more question.
Okay.
Okay. So what are the invasive milkweeds that we should be aware of and definitely not buy?
I would say now I just got the tropical, they told me the tropical um milkweeds on this call. So my guess is if you go, if you go to a local nursery and again, this is not to be harmful, but if you buy, if you, they're red, the ones that I've seen are red and they have red and orange flowers. And gosh darn it, I can probably, before the end of this, I'll be able to I can run down and grab a tag because I think I bought one many years ago, but those would be, because they're not native to North America, those would be the quote tropical ones, but I don't have, I'll get a name, I'll get some species for you. But if you go to the nursery and you buy if you were to buy Asclepias tuberosa, the orange one, no problem. That's a native to Colorado, no problem. And as I said, that Prairie Moon Nursery has all of the native ones for sale that will work. You could buy the one they call antelope horns. There's tons of them that you could purchase. But something that, so I would look at those types of catalogs for I would go to Prairie Moon for some native ones. I just would avoid those orange and red flowered ones that folks can use, during the summer. I have, and that's the only source. I did not get a name, but I think anything that they're very showy.
Well, Carol, I put one in the chat and people are also saying it's like Carassivica or something like that. Currassavica.
Yep, that's it. I think that would be the one. Yeah. That one sounds like, yes. If that's the name of that, then I would say, yeah, do not plant that.
And I will just add generally that this happens with like Echinacea too. If you see a native plant in the nursery, but it's not the color that you know it to be in the wild, probably just stay away from it. And research shows that a lot of pollinators can't even see it when we mess around with those characters.
Yeah, and that was, and that, I have to admit, that was somewhat of a surprise because I have a lot of native, and I just didn't even think about the tropical thing not being something that monarchs would use. So yeah, that's just something I just learned, like I said, a week ago. So thank you for providing that other information. Okay. All right, should we try to tackle the asparagus family? All right, so I would have called this the agave family. I was just so darn confident that yuccas were in the agave family. And here's a funny thing. My daughter is working on her PhD, and she's looking at the first occurrences of cultivated crops like wheat and other things introduced in the Southwest after the Spanish came in. And so because she's looking at plant phytoliths, she thought she found some yucca and all that. And so in working on her PhD, she's proceeding to tell me that yucca is in the asparagus family. And of course, I'm thinking, well, I know everything. No, it's not. It's in the Agavaceae. So it was just kind of funny, things happen and you're just like, it's always the Agavaceae. And then I noticed, I went back to a floor and I thought, well, where the heck's the Agavaceae? What the hell happened? And of course, it's the Asparagaceae. So you learn something new every day. And that was just, I never expected that. Not that I know it all, but it was just kind of funny. Of course, we're quite familiar with this family. As you know, many things like tequila and mezcal are important for a lot of folks that come out of these families. And we've got two subfamilies here now that are rolled into the asparagus, or you could call it the hyacinth family as well. So if we look at the agave, so the subfamily here, we've got, we have perennial herb shrubs or trees. Again, this is a monocot, so we're going to have beautifully showy flowers with 6 tepals that all look the same. We have a huge leafless flowering stem. And in this group, you can have superior or inferior ovaries, enormous with yucca. For instance, you have enormous basal rosettes. So you want to be a little careful. When you run into a yucca, you can get a nice puncture wound because they're very sharp tips. But out in the field, you can cut a leaf off and use it to poke at something. I mean, it's actually a useful tool in a way. And then the fruits, as you know, are capsules or berries. So let's just have a look at yucca. Really showy flowers in this group. Parts in 3s. Again, we have a monocot here, and you have our little leucocrinum here too, which is a cool little native. I always look forward to the spring when they're flowering in the foothills. But again, you can see 6 tepals, right? Everything looks the same. Can't tell a difference. So now the other part of the family here is the what used to be the Themidaceae. And so we will have Camassia, which is a flower that's very common up in the Pacific Northwest. We have a couple of examples here and closer to home here. But Camassia is a pretty neat little plant. The same thing, the corms have a fibrous outer coating. Everything is, all the petals and sepals, they're tepals, they all look the same. We have umbels here, but not compound umbels. The umbel has a papery bract that subtends it. The fruit is a capsule that's going to split open to release the seed. So again, reasonably simple to recognize. We're just printing more copies of this book, and we do have a mistake that we found. Camassia shows up on page 39 in the agave subfamily, if you will, and it isn't. It's in the Themidaceae. It should, and so we've removed in the new edition. We will remove that photo, and it's back on the next page, which is page 40. For those of you that have the book, that's where Camassia belongs. It's in the Themidaceae subfamily. Okay, so again, 6 tepals, and this little cutie was actually found and described by a friend of mine who works in the New Mexico the state office. He is a botanist, and Patrick was able to uncover this plant, and he named and described it. So it's kind of cute. Okay, any other questions about the agaves?
Yes. How do you explain to people why yucca is an asparagus? What are the similar characteristics? And
yeah, go ahead.
Oh, that's okay.
Well, the similar characteristics would all be in the flower. How many, if you've seen the flowers, I mean, obviously, an asparagus stem that we're eating is not like it's not anything like a yucca, But when you see asparagus in the wild flowering, they're going to have very similar, they're going to have 6 tepals. So that's their stem will be a leafless flowering stem. So that those are the characters. And then, of course, the genetics where it all falls together. But they are very similar in that sense. It looks nothing. It has nothing like this giant basil rosette. But it would be, yeah, it is in that overarching, it is in that subfamily out in there. So it's actually, I'm trying to think if I've got another subfamily that asparagus would actually fit into. But in that asparagus family, there's well over 3,000 species. So, yeah. So they all are going to have similar floral characteristics, and that's where it fits, besides how it shakes out with the genetics.
And I will note that if you guys are also looking at Ackerfield, like the asparagus fallout in 1A on page 112, that asparagus have finely dissected branches and are fern-like. And then you go into all the strap-like leaved asparagus species or genus. And another question is, say again which plant is in the incorrect place, please.
Yes, it was Camassia on page 39 there on that identifying characteristic page. Number 3, we're going to take that out. That should have been, we didn't notice it, and I apologize. It should be on page 40 because it's in the Themidaceae now, or the subfamily. So that will not appear in the next, that will be shifted out in the new edition in the new printing that will be coming out in February, and we can get folks updated copies.
All right, thank you.
Sure. All right. This is the aster family now, the sunflower family. What was the old name of that family? Compositae, which was talking about the type of inflorescence it had. Asteraceae is, I think, pretty simple plant family. It's one of the 2 largest plant families in the world. The big one for us out here, of course, is Artemisia or sagebrush, super important. But let's take a look at how we might want to make some identifications. So the main thing about a daisy, if you will, is you can have a receptacle that is broad and flat, like an artichoke. You can have conical ones or columnar ones. So rativitas and these are, you have an extreme variation in the receptacles, which all the other flowers are going to attach to. We can have 3 types of flowers. So you can have plants with ray flowers only, like chicory. You can have plants that have disc flowers only, and you can have plants that they have ray flowers, but they're far more strap shape and ligulate. So if you're thinking of a dandelion, something like that. We can have flowers that have combinations of disc and ray flowers. And so the disc flowers would generally have radial symmetry. The ray flowers would be more tubular. We have a change up the pappus in asters. They can be capillary bristles, plumose bristles, awns, or scales. So that's just a change in terminology. And the ovary is always inferior. And then the fruits are called achenes. So here's a typical inflorescence. So this flower, if you will, has both disc and ray flowers. If we take a look at them, if this is an example, the receptacle's pretty short here, right? But you can see that all of the disc flowers and the ray flowers are attached to that receptacle, and then the white, you can see the white ovaries, and then above them are all the other flower parts, right? At the point of attachment, it's at the top of the ovary, and you can see that we've got some awns here as the pappus, and then you have the tubular flowers for these disc flowers. So the ovary is clearly inferior in the Asteraceae. Here's another example of one that's just all ray flowers. And here's all disc flowers. And you'll note on the outside of the receptacle, we're going to have phyllaries, and those are super important. They're just modified bracts, but you will, when you're having a look at how to identify the phyllaries, you're going to want to know if they are in single rows. Do they overlap? Do they have spines? Because they are characters that are often or always used in the keys to help with identification. So let's just take a look at one flower here. And you can see, again, we're pointing to the ovary that has now become the achene. You have the capillary bristles as the pappus, and you've got the dried up corolla. And again, you note that everything attaches to the top of the ovary, and so clearly inferior. The phyllaries are, as I said, they are very important in identification, and we can call them involucre bracts as well. But you'll notice on that cercium, now this cercium here is a native cercium, but it has spines. So when we get down to the ones that are invasive, we're going to be looking at the types of spines that these have, and it's very easy to identify them. Oh, okay. Okay. Let's see. Let me go to another. Okay. Something I think something happened here. Gosh. All right. Everybody can see that, right? The spines there. So they're going to be somewhat critical in your identification. Okay. All right. The nasties that we deal with most often in Colorado, do you guys Cardus nutans or musk thistle? If you look at the phyllaries there, you're going to see that they are reflexed back and overlapping. And so something like star thistle has really bad spines. So those are a lot of times what we use to do quick IDs for the noxious weed species. But again, important. Let's take a look at a couple of, let me go back here. Okay, so here's the phyllaries again, here's Erigeron, and then of course sagebrush. So does anybody have any questions about asters? ID, again, you're going to have to take that flower apart because looking at the pappus is going to be super critical. Not that simple, but once you get the hang of looking at that, you can make a lot of headway and use the key. I don't know, Maggie, what do you think? I mean, I always hated keying out asters, but I found just, I think Jennifer's key is really, really, really good. And I think once you just kind of figure out how to take the flower apart, I think with a lot of practice, you'll be able to get pretty darn good at identifying them. Again, the key pieces are the pappus, and I think that's going to set you up once you determine what kind of pappus you have and whether what the ray flowers are doing or whether it's disc flowers. I think you're good. Would you agree that might work?
Yeah, and like the start of the key is pappus, absent,
Yep.
pappus, present. Um, and then I will note that like the thing about Asteraceae is also you kind of have to be able to see it, and you got to see it while it's blooming, while it's past bloom,
Right.
you know. So it takes more study than other plants that point to their leaf characters. And then questions in the chat. Can you talk a little bit about families and subfamilies? Like what results in a subfamily?
Oh gosh.
And I
Well,
looked it up just so I would have a definition in my head, but later said they're intermediate ranks between family and genus. And I was
yeah,
gonna say Asteraceae, you could kind of like further divide into if you understood if you're looking at like a senecio or you know a specific dietaria or something like that.
yeah. Well, there's yeah, and they have different tribes. Sometimes they use the word tribes to describe the different little families, little subfamilies. So it really, it's just, yeah, it's intermediate, and there's just certain characters that they are going to, that are going to set little groups apart. Now, in Jennifer's book, I think when she's talking about the different keys, so she's looking at sort of what I would call some of these subfamily characters. She might say the heads are ligulate. So that means that it has strap shaped ray flowers. Okay, so that's one thing. And then she's going to say sap, milkier colored. Then, you know, so another tribe might have something like heads discoid or rays small and inconspicuous. So she's kind of doing that in her keys. There is a book that has, it's about the sunflower family, that has a little bit more detail with all of that. But that's kind of what they're looking at. They're looking at these characters that separate amongst all the species, and they, you know, they're grouping them into similar things. And I hope that's helpful. Does that make any sense?
Yes, folks, we just need to remind ourselves that science is not immutable. Um, there are little extra details like this. And then one final question about thistles. Well, Annette says this tribe is always in between family and genus, a term to describe between family and genus. And then thistles, do native thistles have spines?
Yes, yes. And that picture that let's back up if I can do this. That one is a native thistle, Cirsium undulatum, and it has spines. Yes. And that's kind of a bummer, because I have sometimes almost, you know, flipped out when I've been working in the field, and some of our folks who are in the weed program leap out of a vehicle because they see literally see Cirsium undulatum, and they want to dig it out of the ground. And it's like, whoa, hold on. That is not one of the noxious weeds. So yes, it is. It's unfortunate. And that's again why we tried to do this, because I have a dilly of a time. I give lectures to the weed people every year about what is a noxious weed and what isn't. And so, yes, and unfortunately, some of the natives have spines. Everything with a spine isn't noxious, but that's how it goes.
And I'm going to add one comment, which I started typing, that Jennifer Ackerfield is a thistle expert, and
Yes.
she's extremely active on iNaturalist. So if you go to iNaturalist, I'm putting her name in here. It's Jackerfield. And so, you know, you can really go through tons of thistles looking at her observations.
Yes. Okay. Barberry family, common Mahonia is the plant that you probably all are familiar with. The genus now has become Berberis, but that is a family of shrubs. There are herbs in there too, but primarily here we're dealing with what we would have called Mahonia repens, which is now Berberis repens, and it's in, it's always an understory, especially in some of our shady pine forests and other places. What's one thing, and it's used, Mahonia repens is a common garden plant. Many of you that have native gardens may in fact have Mahonias as an understory that's used quite a bit in landscaping. One thing that's interesting is if you cut the stem, the inner bark will be yellowy. Ovary superior, fruit can be a berry, a capsule, or a follicle. Follicle is the same type of fruits that milkweeds have, of course, except they split open on one suture. All right, so here's just a Berberis or Mahonia repens, again, the common garden plant. And you can really see that the wood is in fact yellowy if you scrape away. There's actually one from my garden there. Okay, any questions on Berberis?
I don't see any in the chat.
Okay, cool. All right, borage is one of my favorite families. Forget-me-nots, of course, are in the borage family. And again, this is another family where we combined two separate plant families. And you have what went in there. They added the hydrophils, the phacelias. So that had been talked about for a very long time. And we, based on DNA or molecular evidence now, you're going to have the two of them combined into one family. We do have some characters which of course are similar and some which are different for the family. So let's have a look at that. So what would be the most important characters that I would look at? In the leaves in this family, they're generally alternate or opposite, and they can be very rough, hairy. Borages in particular can be super rough, hairy, and you want to, yeah, it's not pleasant to touch some of the Amsynchias or some of the other species in there. They just, when they're dry, the Cryptanthus, they can really poke your fingers because they're so hairy. Common inflorescence where is a scorpioid cyme, so it's curled up and it looks like a fern. Fiddlehead, one of the both flowers are actinomorphic or have radial symmetry. However, if you're dealing with Phacelia, you're going to have the stamens exerted well beyond the corolla lobe. So that's a very simple field ID. Ovaries are superior, and what's different, there's going to be between borages and Phacelias. Borages have deeply four-lobed ovaries, and they have what is called a gynobasic style. So we'll have a look at that in a minute. But it looks like there's four lobes, and the style looks like it's going right down through the center of that ovary. That's going to be common in the mints as well. But something like Phacelia is not a lobed ovary, and instead the style is simply terminal to that. And so fruits are nutlets or capsules. And again, you're going to need the fruits to really identify the species that you have. So here's an example of the four-lobed ovary in a classic borage, like Mertensia. And you can see the four lobes here, and you can see the styles poking out. They're looking like they're going straight through the center. So when this thing is flowering, you'll see that if you have your hand lens, just look inside that flower, you'll see those four lobes. You know it's a borage. And then I have on the right here Amsynchia, which is has that scorpioid cyme. And again, you see the hairs. Borages, again, super hairy, very rough. the hairs are more silky in the hydrophil, so they don't hurt. But I can tell you from experience in collecting sometimes the seed of borages for our, for our seed program. Yeah, when it's dried up, they really poke. Again, phacelias, I mentioned the exserted stamens, so you can be rolling by on the highway. If you've got a patch of phacelias, it'd be pretty easy to see those stamens, and you know right away, oh, that purple thing's a phacelia. We also have accessory parts in the borages, and so you can see the little white, those are accessory parts that are placed on the petals. Sometimes, I haven't heard this in a long time, people might, this is a forget-me-not, of course, but people might call them cat's eyes as well. And again, in my line of work, we're really interested in the cryptanthas or Oreocarias, because now the genera have changed for whether it is annual or perennial. Oreocarias, we have a numerous rare ones in the state that we're working on. And again, identification for some of these is going to require getting the fruits and really looking at the ornamentation on the fruits. I don't know if you've looked at the flora, but chiming bells or mertensias, in the new key in the Boraginaceae here, my gosh, that mertensia key is really something. I was like, oh my goodness. But again, it's all about the fruits, and Jennifer's got terrific pictures of the fruits, so this will be very helpful. All right, any questions on borages? So that one is reasonably simple to, I think, recognize.
Carol, there is a question. I don't think exists. So how can we know about updates to taxonomy? Is there some sort of place we can learn that, or a book or something?
Well, yeah, I would for me, one of the things like that I really looked at was the big publication from Kew about the plants of the world, which is in the references, which is an illustrated encyclopedia of vascular plants. But where I often go, I just use SciNet sometimes, because for me, if I just plug into www.southwestbiodiversity.org, you could start pumping in plant names, and that will tell you what plant family they're in. So again, SciNet, www.southwestbiodiversity.org is probably the fastest place for me, because there are various other folks that have programs that are accessible, sometimes yes, sometimes no. So I've just, and of course, like Jennifer's new edition here of the Flora of Colorado, her second edition, perfect. But now things may be changing from there. So again, SciNet's kind of my go-to. If I have a question about, where did this thing end up, I'll just pump it in, look up the name, and then it'll tell you what family it's in, and that's the fastest for me. And I, because otherwise, it's just, I'll get information through various other things, but like I say, SciNet's the fastest.
All right, thanks. And Jan offered in the chat that at the DBG or Barium, they use that Q resource for the plants of the world, which I put in the chat.
Yeah, good. Yeah, because that to me is the best. That's kind of what I have, and I did pop that into your references as well. So that's super. I'm glad they have that down there. Cool. All right. Let's have a look at the mustard family. Old name Cruciferae, meaning that we had cross-shaped flowers. And again, the mustards, pretty simple, lots of easy characters here. What's most important really is the structure of the flower. So we have 4 petals and 4 sepals. We've got they're cross shaped, so pretty simple. The stamens, 4 long, 2 short. The term is tetradynamous. So if you look inside with your hand lens, you're going to see that there are 4 stamens that are longer than the other 2, and then the ovary is superior. The fruits are unique. We call them siliques or silicals, so whether they're long and skinny or round and chubby. What's interesting, if you think of dried flower arrangements and the money plant, there's this silvery thing which is called a replum, which is a false septum that separates the 2 halves of the fruit. That is unique to the mustard family. So in the dead of winter, you could be walking around anywhere, and you'll see the remains of the fruits with these little replums, and shoot, that was a mustard. And the other thing are the hairs on the mustards are pretty important sometimes to look at as well. But anyhow, here's an example: 4 long, 2 short, tetradynamous. You see that with 4 petals, it's a mustard. And then the fruits, again, in this particular one, here is the silicle at the top, and then the silique at the top, excuse me. And then if you look down, the rounder fruits, you can see that there's lots of little silvery replums left on the plant. So mustard, super simple family to identify. Here's our great little Physaria bellii from out in the foothills. And here's a bucra that has more siliques, long and thin. Okay, so mustard family, any questions? But that one, that's solid. And I would say, again, for me, I just remember 4 long, 2 short, and parts in 4s, and I'm golden.
No questions.
Okay. Cactus family. Again, I think we won't have many questions on the cactus family. Pretty dang simple to have a look at. I guess what would be most interesting is they can have spines, and the areoles are the spots where the spines and the flowers originate. We have glaucids, which are the short barbed hairs that can be around the areoles or in other tufts on the plant. And those are things you don't want to have your fingers. If you poke your fingers in there, they're going to be, these little barbed hairs are going to be stuck in your fingers for quite some time. The main thing is in some of the identification is to try to figure out if the areoles, are they arranged in rows or whatever, and that's going to help. Are they nipple-like? That's going to really be most of the identification issues. So you just have to look at it. Sometimes you might be, I remember in the old Weber books, we sometimes looked at the distance between areoles, but that's really not what we're looking at now. So the keys are pretty straightforward. They either have glaucids or spines, or they lack glaucids, or this or that. So I think, I think ID should be pretty simple in the cactus family. And again, just taking a look at the tubercles here. So here's the claret cup cactus. And an example here, this one, Triclogidioides variety in Ermis, was once actually listed as an endangered species, but had to be removed because it through work on genetics, it was realized that it's whether you have spines or not in this particular species, they're all the same. So it did not fit the definition of under the Endangered Species Act of a distinct species. So it was removed from the list, which is, I think, kind of interesting because that was first listed in 1988, and it took a while, obviously, for this work to be done. So again, just a quick look at the aerials. All right. And just a favorite here, saguaro. Just had a look at them last year when I was working down in Arizona. And a few more. Any questions on cacti?
No questions.
Okay. Bellflower family, I think the little Campanulaceae, I think are most, the one you're all mostly familiar with is our little Campanula up in the foothills. That's just a really cool little plant. There are of course lobelias and other things, but I think you probably are all familiar with Campanula rotundifolia. So again, parts in fives. We can have radially symmetric or bilaterally symmetric plants. We can have a hypanthium here, and fruits or capsules or berries. And so here at the top is probably the one you're most familiar with. We have a Downingia as an annual here in Colorado, but I have to admit I have not seen it in Colorado. All right. And then we can do the honeysuckle family if you guys are ready for that one.
Actually, Carol, we kind of breezed right by a midway break.
So yes, I was okay. I was just
how
gonna
about
say
we
that.
just take a break for it's exactly 10:50. So why don't we take it like I would say a full 10-minute break. And then at 11 a.m. we'll come back. Is that okay, folks? All right, folks, we'll get started here in a minute. Hope you got to stretch your legs. All right, folks, we will get going again. I will be manning the chat just as we did before, and we will keep moving through these families. Ask your great questions. One question that I had, Carol, was what's the link to order more books? But I think Elizabeth found it. It's like blm.gov/Colorado BLM library.
All right, so let's go back to Caprifoliaceae honeysuckle family. One of the things where we have a slight departure from Jennifer's book, I'm using the Q plant families, and so I have the valerians in the Caprifoliaceae or the honeysuckle family. Jennifer still has them as a separate family, but they're all quite similar. The characters are all quite similar, so it's not a big deal, but it's just something to note. One of the things, here's another leaves for a shrubby group here. Leaves are opposite, and you're probably all most familiar with things like snowberry, honeysuckle. Of course, there is Linnea in there, which is herbaceous, but those are some of the things that you've probably all seen. Dealing with them, we have tubular flowers here. So the calyx is a tube. The corolla is rotate, 2 cylindric and 5 lobed. So they are all tubular flowers, and they can either have radial or bilateral symmetry. The ovary is inferior, and fruits most commonly are berries, but you probably have seen the drupes. So just an example of Symphoricarpus, very common, opposite leaves. And I'm just throwing opposite leaves out again, that's one of the big characters that you can start making your charts of key diagnostic features for families. Again, opposite leaves is a big one that because that shakes out a whole lot of plant families. So this is, of course, Symphoricarpus. Any questions? Again, I would say I mostly deal with the shrubs or subshrubs. With the valerians, I'm most familiar with Valerian capitata, some of the herbaceous things. Again, they have opposite leaves, or they can have basal rosettes, but they are all based on the genetics in one family now. And I deal with the valerians at a somewhat higher elevation, not always. Any questions about the honeysuckle family?
No questions.
Okay. One of my favorite families is coming up, the carnation or the pink family. which is, I think, a pretty easy one to recognize. If it kind of looks like a carnation, well, by God, it must be in that family. They're a family that has lots of parts and fives, but just think for a minute of your typical carnation at the grocery store. What are one of the things you notice? We have opposite leaves. Oops, another opposite leaf family. Big visual character. And they're kind of swollen at the nodes, right? Why is that? Because where the leaves attach at the node, you have like this transverse furrow, which is a ridge of tissue that connects the two leaves across the stem. So it makes kind of a bump. And they're sort of knobby-kneed. Now there's going to be another plant family that is similar, that has a knobby-kneed approach, but opposite leaves swollen at the nodes. Immediately, and if I saw the flowers somewhat showy, because they of our parts in five. So we have five kind of showy sepals, five showy petals, which can be deeply cleft. And sometimes we call it clawed because there's a long extension at the end of the petal, or they're fringed. And the old name, one of the old names of the common name was the pink family. So if you think of your dianthus and things that you may have in your garden, yeah, they look like someone took pinking shears and clipped the ends of the petals. Ovary is superior with something that's kind of tricky that it's hard to demonstrate here. And I'll try, it's called free central placentation, and that is a big character. And so what are we talking about? We're talking about inside the ovary where the seeds are placed. So to try to visualize this without me being able to draw you a picture is if you think of an orange for a minute, okay? And you just cut an orange in half, right? And when you open that orange, there's obviously walls, and there are little seeds that are attached to the center of that. And that's called axil or placentation. Now, if you're thinking about cutting an ovary of a carnation to see where what the pattern of attachment of the ovules are, we're going to think about it in this way. Think of a balloon that you blow up to make balloon animals. And so your finger would be sticking up inside of that balloon. Okay, so you've got all this empty space, but your finger inside this long balloon is the central column. So if I were to cut through that, all the seeds would be attached around my finger in the center of this balloon, and there's all this open space. So like an ant could walk around in there, right? So that means free central. The only other option in the pinks is to have the seeds attached at the base of the ovary, but most commonly we think of the balloon example with free central. So that is a major character of carnations. However, as you know from looking at some of them in the field, it's so darn tiny. Even with your hand lens, this is going to be a mess trying to do a section of the ovary. So I would always go with opposite leaves, stems swollen at the nodes, and reasonably showy flowers. So here is an example. Again, there's that transverse ridge of tissue going across the node. And then here's some of the cool plants that are in this family, the silenes or silene. Some people want to say that, very showy, and you can see how the petals are fringed or deeply cleft. Capsules, have apical teeth, so the seeds will spill out of the top, and that's a dianthus. And then there's a favorite one. I don't know if you've been to Pawnee Buttes and other places, but these little Arenaria hooker eyes are just so darn cool. And when they open up their flowers, oh gosh, they're just beautiful to look at them. And now you may be calling this Eremogene, actually, because that's the new genus. It would be hooker sandwort. I still sometimes use the old terminology of arenaria, which obviously we did here. But these are really cool. All right. Any questions on carnations? Probably one of the easiest plant families to recognize.
No questions. Thank you.
All righty. Spider flowers. We use Cleome actually as a restoration species. If you've been driving around out, especially on the western slope up in the area of the Piceance Basin, you probably will see tons of Cleomes, some of the pipelines, they use them for restoration. I mean, yeah, it's a fine restoration species. Anyhow, leaves are simple or palmately compound. What's interesting is there's, again, 4 petals. So this is parts in 4s here. We have 6 stamens, and they're generally exserted, but they're not tetradynamous. So they're all the same length, not as in the mustards, 4 long, 4 too short. What's cool here is they have a stalk-like receptacle that the ovary is attached to, which is called a gynophore. And we will take a look at that. And then the capsules open by 2 valves. So they're very similar to mustard fruits. And in fact, there has been, some of them would have all been in the same family, but they're still keeping them separated. But who knows, in the future, additional molecular evidence may put them all in one family. And you can see in this picture, you can see the fruit forming, and on the upper one, and you've got that long stalk. So that is called the gynophore, and you can see it with the exserted stamens below. So that's again, dead ringer for Cleome. Palanzias, you've probably run into them. They're very sticky plants, sort of an unpleasant odor for some reason too. But again, same characters that you will see, except they are kind of really sticky. And and you can see that there might be similarities with that fruit open there, except it doesn't have the replum that the mustard would have. So closely related. Any questions about Cleome?
But no replum, which you just addressed, was the only question.
Yep. No replum. And yeah, it's going to be interesting because we may throw in Caparaceae into the mix too at some point. So we'll see where it all goes. How about the fabulous morning glory family? I like morning glories. We don't like bindweed, unfortunately, but super easy to recognize things in the morning glory family. Big, radially symmetric flowers. They have a folded corolla, so they're very, very showy. They're funnel or cup shaped, parts in 5s, all very simple to identify, and twisted in bud. That's just another little thing. When you're out on the landscape, you see this viney thing, and you see that the flowers are already twisted in bud. Well, you're in the morning glory family. Very, very attractive. And there it is, folded up or in bud there. We also, we have calistegias. I think they're pretty cool. I have not encountered them many times in my field work. And I don't actually, we do have some here in Colorado, but I have not actually encountered them. More eastern slope, and I just haven't come across them yet. And of course, you have dodder or cuscuta, and you've all seen them crawling up over a lot of our shrubs. So morning glory, pretty simple. Any questions? We can move on to cucumbers, and cucumber family, again, pretty simple to identify. We all know that they're vines, rarely shrubs. The leaves are coarse, hairy. I feel like sandpaper half the time when you're out there. From growing pumpkins and squash that they are, unisexual flowers, and the corollas are cup to bell shaped. Ovary is obviously inferior, and the fruit is a berry, and we have a very thick rind. So it is called a pepo. And of course, the one that we are most familiar with would be the melon. The common name for some reason is coyote melon, and you will see them all over the landscape here. And here's an example of one of them. So if it looks like a pumpkin, if it has a thing that looks like a giant pumpkin for a fruit, or if you go back and have a look at the structure of the flowers, you know that's the cucumber family. We've got there's one other thing in the cucumber family. I don't know if many of you have seen, what's the common name? Oh shoot. It's another trailing vine that we've got. Golly, I'm trying to think of the common name of it. I'm pretty bad on common names. And I'll remember it. It is Echinocystis. What is Echinocystis? I think that's wild cucumber. That's another one that you should see, especially sort of in the metro area. I see a lot. It's another annual that has tendrils. I see it climbing up a lot of the trees and shrubs here in a lot of our open space parks. So, okay. Okay, ready for the sedge family, unless there's questions about cucumbers.
There was a question, why is Cleomacea used for restoration, and what species are used?
They are used for restoration because they're very, very showy and they attract pollinators. So that's the big deal there. And we are mandated through policy that we need to, in every restoration mix, and this is a positive thing, but in every restoration mix, we should include at least one species, which is not enough for pollinators, because of we now, as a nation, are worrying about pollinators, and we're going to be seeing the monarchs and western bumblebee and a lot of other things disappearing, and they're presumably going to be listed as endangered with the Endangered Species Act. So rather than allowing land management agencies to get away with just seeding grasses and things that livestock will eat, we need to be considerate of the pollinator populations and what's happening. So that's why. And probably Cleome cerulata is the most common use because it's in production. You can buy it from many seed companies, and hopefully we will be able to, and I guess it's marketed as what, Rocky Mountain bee plant. That hopefully through our program, we will be able to have more actual species available. But so far, the other one that might be available is the yellow one, which is, what do they call it? Yellow spider flower, which is Cleome lutea, I think, lutea. So that's the whole reason why. Okay.
All right, thanks.
Sure. All right. Sedge family. And as a kid, many of you probably heard sedges have edges. So I'm just gonna, for sedges, rushes, and grasses, we're just gonna briefly touch on the characters that you really know. Sedges to me are, for some reason, harder to identify than grasses for some reason. But what do we want to know? How do I tell the difference between whether it's a grass, whether it's a sedge, or whether it's a rush? And so there's some pretty simple characters that we want to have a look at. You know, they all have flowers that lack colorful petals. They're arranged in spikelets. We've got bracts, leaves are parallel veined, but shoot, that's kind of just barely scratching the surface. So sedges have edges. Stems are mostly triangular. Sometimes they can be terete, which would mean round in cross section. Our leaves are usually linear. They can be basal. They're arranged in 3 ranks, so that means that there are 3 rows. Now, what's important if you're going to try to look at a sedge versus a grass is the part that wraps around the stem, the part of the leaf that wraps around the stem can be open or closed. So in sedges, the sheath is closed and we can't pull it away like we can in many grasses. We cannot pull it away from the stem. So we'll have a look at that. Flowers do not have a perianth, and most of the time, or they can have bristle-like scales. The big thing here is there's always each floret is subtended by a chaffy bract. Stamens are usually 3. And the most important thing, the fruit's in achene, but in genus Carex, which you will probably be dealing with most of the time, there's going to be a membrane that goes around the fruit that's called a periginium, and that is super important to use an identification. I took a class in graduate school, and yeah, I have a periginia collection. I mean, I just, from the various plants that I looked at, I just taped them down. So I mean, now I hardly refer to it now, but that's just like the level that you go to make sure you got the right species. So here's a nice triangular stem, and here's the sheath. So you can see over at the right here where the open part, the leaf blade or lamina, is attaching to the stem, but you note from that little white triangle to the right of the screen, that is closed. You could not pull away the base of that leaf. And so that's generally what we face with sedges, except, that is the way that they mostly are. I'm sure there's an exception here or there, but for the most part, closed sheath, unlike grasses where you could actually, it would be open and you could pull it away. The periginia that I've talked about, super important in genus Carex, so you will have to pay quite a bit of attention to that. And if you have Jennifer's key, she goes into the periginia, and she might be talking about some of the accessory parts too, but that is super important. Just a couple of shots before moving on to the heaths. Is there anything in general about Carex?
No questions.
Okie doke. All right, heath family. Another favorite plant for me in the heath family here in Colorado would be Arctostaphylos, because we up near Meeker, we've got a really cool patch of Arctostaphylos patula. That's the only place where it is in Colorado. And I really, really like going up and visiting that. I love, vaccinium and little pyrolas. And it's a cool family. It's mostly temperate subtropical, but we have some nice examples here. And of course, Arctostaphylos in California and other places, manzanitas have incredible red stems with the peeling bark. That just really fantastic plants. We do have a spelling error. Yes, Carol can spell, but she obviously missed it. On page 86, the family name is spelled wrong. We are correcting that in the edition that we've just put in to be reprinted. So, and then we had a misidentification of one of our pictures, which we've also corrected. Okay. But anyhow, Eric Casey definitely spelled wrong. I don't know how I missed that. So what do we want to look at? Biggest identification thing is the bark is often peeling on the stems. And that is, yes, that's something that you're going to be able to see very easily. They are generally evergreen, or they can have deciduous leaves. Leaves are leathery, and we've got these funky little things called beach drops in there, which are kind of neat. So pterospores and other things are in this family, which are nice. You'll see a lot of pterosporas if you're up looking at lodgepole pine in the duff below the lodgepole. I often see a lot of huge pterosporas. Flowers, I have 4 to 5 petals. They can be free or fused. They're urn-shaped corollas. That's probably another good character for the flowers, and fruits are various. But the main thing to me is looking at those, the urn-shaped flowers, and then the peeling bark. And of course, we have, our little Arctostaphylos or bearberries up here, Uva ursi, which is one that everybody knows. And that's so that is a perfect example of the characters in the Ericaceae. All right. And some of the beach drops, well, they mostly lack chlorophyll, but again, I enjoy looking at the pterosporas. And the little pyrolas are kind of cool too. I've up at a little higher elevation, the wintergreens, they're all neat. So pretty simple. Any questions? And here's a nice Kalmia as well. And I know we do have Kalmia here, and we in fact have this species up here in Colorado as well. So alpine laurel, it's a very nice plant.
We do have 2 questions.
Okay.
The first is what is needed to ID the perigenium of carrots? Naked eye, hand lens, microscope?
You need a hand lens will do. Sometimes you can use a microscope, but your hand lens ought to be perfect because you'll be looking at the nerves or other things on it. So that should work just fine. If you can get them in the palm of your hand lens is perfect.
Okay, and then how large do the stems need to be before you can see shredding bark?
I'd say on the manzanitas, they're fine. If I say a foot tall or something, I mean, yeah, it's on the giant tree, the giant Arctostaphylos that you will see out in California, yeah, they're like 6 feet or more tall. But here, if you have a little Arctostaphylos in your yard, I would say if you've got 6 to 8 inches of growth, you should be able to see that that peeling bark.
Okay, thank you. And can you say again which picture was misid'd?
Yes, it's page 87, and that is it should be Perola dentata. We just recently spoke with Ron Wolf, who was the individual who took the photo. It is not Chimaphila there. It is Perola dentata. So that has been corrected in the version that hopefully will be available to all you guys in February if you want copies of just a couple of the corrections that we made. It's out for printing right now, and so we're very hopeful. But yeah, sorry about that, folks. We didn't notice it until we started looking at it a few weeks ago, and it's like, oh my God. Yeah, okay.
All right, thank you.
Sure, and then there's some rhododendrons, cool little plants, very showy. Ooh, Euphorb family, spurge. Now, of course, everybody knows the Christmas flower, the poinsettia. And if you look at that, you've got all the characters that you need to be able to identify a euphorb. Unfortunately, we have problems with an invasive here in many, 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 many millions of acres in the West, and that kind of is a bummer. But otherwise, they're pretty nice little plants. But leafy spurge is one that we are spending literally millions of dollars on public lands to eliminate it, which, it's just a never-ending job, and it's unfortunate. We have another euphorb that has escaped and it's sort of the epicenter of its distribution is up here in the foothills in Golden, which is Euphorbia mercenites. And that plant, unfortunately, is very drought tolerant. And it was like, ooh, this thing's got to be great for gardening, right? Ooh. But what happened is myrtle spurge is pretty aggressive, and it went ahead and has expanded its range from people's gardens to everywhere. And it is one of those things that it is extremely difficult to remove. And I don't know where all you live, but back, I'm going to say 5 to 10 years ago, Lakewood, as folks were the weed folks for this for Denver, city and county of Denver, were actually going on a big campaign to remove Euphorbia mercenites. And you may have, if you had it growing out in your lawn or whatever, in a curbside area where you may have had plants, you may have received a notice that said, if you don't remove Euphorbia mercenites, we will come and remove it for you, and you will be given a bill. So that campaign, I think, has ended, but that's just how aggressive this plant is and how folks really wanted to remove it from the landscape, but it's too late at this point. So what are the identifying characteristics of euphorbias? And we're talking about the classic euphorbs. So think again of that poinsettia plant. We have obviously milky or colored latex. Flowers are unisexual. There are no petals. So all the colored things, the red things that you see are modified leaves or bracts. But what's interesting, if you look in the center, we have a cup-like structure. So in the center of, quote, the flowers of a poinsettia or leafy spurge or anything else, you've got this cup-like thing, which is called a cyathium. Inside the cyathium, we would have a pistil, and the anthers are in there so that, when the flower, if you will, is pollinated, out pops a fruit. And so you will see that, and I'll show you pictures of that. What looks like petals around this cup are petaloid appendages and nectar glands. So it's always gooey, but those are just accessory parts that happen to be on the cyathium. And the fruit is the capsule. So the capsule comes out, as you can see here. So there's the capsules, a 3-celled capsule on the left. And then on the right, you see the top of the cyathium in the center there. And you see these horn things, which are actually glands. So that looks very much like the Christmas flower. And those are, again, just accessory parts. Everything is inside that cup. And again, euphorbs, the milky sap is the big thing. Again, easy to recognize. And yeah, but we mostly, there's several genera that we deal with, but I would say you probably are most familiar with euphorbias out in the foothills, because there are lots of euphorbs. Okay, and here's just, like, this is really showy. Kind of a nice one, but all the white and the red, those are all accessory parts that look like petals. All right. Okay to go on to peas?
Yes. And I just noted that the city of Denver is still doing this Purge the Spurge event.
Okay.
But it didn't really hit our calendar because they just put it on Facebook. So keep an eye out on your own.
Yeah. Yeah, I know it's tough, but it's the only way to deal with it, because this is a tough plant. Fire, it doesn't burn. So they want it out, which creates lots of problems. So, okay, pea family. I mostly work with the genus Astragalus, but this is a great family, easy to recognize. And there are 3 subfamilies, the mimosa, the Caesalpinioidii, and the ones that look like butterflies, which are the ones that I work with mostly around here, the Papilionoidii. So if it looks like a pea flower that's growing in somebody's garden, that's it. It's in the bean family. And the interesting thing about the 5 separate parts of it all comes together kind of to look like a butterfly. So we've got 5 separate petals in this subfamily that you're all familiar with. The biggest one is either called the banner or the standard, and that's the largest and most showy. On the two petals on the outside are called the wings, and then in the center, what looks like a little rowboat is the keel, which inside there are the reproductive parts of the flower. And one of the things that's interesting that you might need to know is the arrangements of the stamens. So it's a 9+1, or they're all free. So that means in a 9+1 that the stamen are fused. The filaments of the stamens are fused around the ovary, and you'll see that definitely in golden banner or thermopsis. Some of the other things that you're familiar with, the red bud, cercis, is in the Caesalpinioidii. And then there's the mimosas, which are mainly woody flowers. So let's have a woody trees and shrubs. So here's a prosopis is a great example of the mimosas. And a thing to note about all of these things, they have compound leaves, very important, and the hairs on the leaves are also going to be important for diagnosis here. And then here are the fairy dusters, I think is the common name of Calliandra. These are Calliandras are big, big landscape plants in California, Arizona, and lots of other places. The sennas and Caesalpinias, you may see them, but you can see from that fruit that is definitely a in the Fabaceae. So let's go back in and look at the characters of the families that I work with mostly. So again, plants woody or herbaceous, leaves are mostly compound. As I said, they can be pinnate or bipinnate, sometimes trifoliolate. So they will have 3 leaflets. Flowers can be radially or bilaterally symmetric. And again, we've got these 5 petals, so it's going to look like a butterfly in a sense when it all comes together. The banner or the standard, as I said, was the biggest one. We have 2 lateral petals and 2 innermost petals that are forming that rowboat. So the keel looks like a little rowboat. Stamens, again, mostly 10, but in some we can have a 9+1 arrangement. The fruit is, you could call it a legume or a loment. A loment is a chain pod, so it looks like a series of circles stuck together. So we'll have a look at that, and that's going to dehisce laterally. So compound leaves, just you can have they can be even or odd compound. You've got hairs, which will be important. The way the hairs are attached to the leaf, and that comes up in the keys. And here's that flower again, big banner, 2 wings, and then the keel in the center. Inside there would be the reproductive parts, and the fruits, a legume or legume, however you wish to say it, or the loment. So that's on the far right, the chain pod. So it's going to dehisce laterally. But if you've got something that looks like a string bean, then you know it can only be this particular plant family, the Fabaceae. And that on the left is little Astragalus lutosus, which at one time was going to be listed under the Endangered Species Act, but it's turned out it's a much larger, wide-ranging endemic than they had anticipated. It usually occurs on shale barrens. The Piceance Basin is a really great place to see that little plant. Just some examples of some clovers. Again, that flower, easy to recognize. Here's another astragalus, and you can see those fruits. Again, if you have this, everything you've got, you'll know right away what plant family you're in. Lupins, of course, are there. And not anything before we move on to we don't have much in the silk tassel family here, the Garrias. So
I think we're good.
okay. Okay, the silk tassel family is really I think of it as where I've worked in California and other places. I don't even, frankly, we don't have Garria here, but it's a very interesting shrub. The leaves are evergreen, they're leathery, and the inflorescences are catkin-like, which is kind of cool. And they are unisexual. So, and fruits are berries. So we can just take a look at Garria here. How about gentians? If everybody loves the gentians, the bluest flowers that we see out there, usually in somewhat moister environments. I mostly work on them at much higher elevation. So you're probably familiar with just gentian, swertia, fraseras, all of these things are pretty cool. What would I say would be some of the most interesting things? Ooh, leaves opposite. So that's another one. If you're trying to figure out key diagnostic feature, where am I going to put that? So that's one thing you might want to list as you're shaking out the families here. Opposite leaves. The leaves are usually fused at the base. Okay. 4 or 5 meris parts to the flower, so parts and 4s or 5s. Sepals are fused. Corolla, they are often bell-shaped, tubular, or funnel-shaped. Ovary is superior. Fruits a capsule. And here we are. Here's another. You can just see those beautifully opposite leaves that are basally connate. If you see something like that that's super blue, I mean, I'd guess immediately, oof, this has got to be a gentian. Depending on the habitat that I'm in, it just, yeah, it's that simple. And here's some of the fraseras, which we all see as we're driving around on the western slope, and especially in years where we have, big blooms, they're amazing. So that is another pretty simple plant to be able to find. Again, meadows, aspen, spruce forest, all these places, and high alpine are good gentian territory. Geraniums, crane's bills, and this is again another plant family, will be a snap, because if it looks like a heron's bill, you got the geranium family. So let's take a look at that. So again, here leaves can be alternate or opposite, not that important. But what is important is the arrangement of the fruit, which is called a schizocarp again, and it's going to, each part, there's 5 parts, what they're going to roll up on a single part called a mericarp on a central beak. So that's the name crane's bill or heron's bill. Leaves in here can be palmately lobed or deeply divided. But what's interesting again is this fruit. So if you've been out in the field and you've seen this, that is a geranium. Go no farther. You know exactly what you're looking at, what plant family you're in. Super simple. Here, very showy flowers. Okay, the gooseberry family. Ribes is, I just noticed the time, so if I'm going too fast, tell me to slow down, but I don't want to keep you, much long, over the time that we've allotted. So Maggie, if I need to speed it up even more, I will.
Well, we do need to speed it up if we intend to go through all of them. Or we can just have a graceful break.
Uh-huh.
and then we could potentially follow up some other time.
Yeah, okay, we can do that, yes. Or if you just want to hit some families. Yeah, so let folks tell us what we want to do.
Well, let's plan to finish by noon, but
Okay.
how do you feel if we have some requests? Are there any family
Oh,
requests?
I love requests. I love requests. I mean, that's, yeah, because I wasn't sure. And if people have something they really want to look at, yeah, let's go there. Perfect.
Okay, so we got gooseberries and graminoids.
Okay, got it. Okay.
Any tricky ones? Like, I think buckwheat would be an interesting one.
Okay, yeah, I was just going to actually say that because that's what if anybody have any issues with mints? I mean, because that's something let's mention something about Lamier.
Oh, okay, here we go. People are really offering it up now. So we got gooseberries, graminoids, mint, plantains, oro, ACA,
Which one again? After Plantagenaceae?
oro, bank, and
Oh, okay. That's all part of the penstemon. Yeah, yeah, that's good. Broom rapes. We got it.
Yeah, let's stop there. I'm sure we can't go any farther than that. But if we did meet in the field, right, we could
Yeah.
meet up again in the summer and do some of this together in person.
Yeah,
And go
sure.
for a
No,
walk.
yeah, I'd be happy. We can schedule something because I'm out a lot. I mean, gone at least 2 or 3 weeks a month in the field. So somewhere I can run into you guys.
All right. Well, yeah, just pick from that list and we have about 10 more minutes.
Okay, we'll do it. Okay, let's take a look at gooseberries again, folks. This one is probably the easiest in the whole darn book. What do we got? Gooseberries, genus Ribes, economically important plants, and they're woody shrubs with spines. So there you go. Could be pretty simple. The flowers, the little tubular flowers are really easy to recognize. Ovaries inferior and fruits are berries. So I think that is when you see the little flowers, I think it is the easiest thing that to be able to identify any spiny shrub that has tubular flowers. To me, that must be a ribes. You don't have to worry that it has a hypanthium and all these things. You can take that apart and figure that out, that the petals are inserted near the top of the hypanthium and obviously the ovaries inferior. But if you just have these little tubular fruits hanging down and there's spines on this darn thing, got to be a gooseberry. And if the fruit looks like a gooseberry, you got it. So that's probably our simplest family to identify. Yeah, I would say that's, yeah. And there's quite a number. We do have quite a number of species in Colorado, but yeah, pretty simple. So we wanted to do gooseberry. Okay, let's move on to, somebody said mints. Why did I said mints, but why did I say mints? Because it's another plant family surprise with opposite leaves. So just to point out a couple of things, we can have a 4-angled stem, or mints are square in cross section, leaves are opposite. So we've had a lot of other opposite things. And so you got to think about, okay, how many of those families have opposite leaves? But hey, this one's got a square stem in cross section, and it has something, the 4-lobed ovary with the gynobasic style. Oops, who had that? The borages. But did the borages have a square stem? No. Did the borages have opposite leaves? No, they have alternate leaves. So these are the kind of snap things that you can do to say, my God, this is a mint. I'm not confused with anything else. I know this is a mint. The other thing is, In mints, generally we have what we call, they're tubular flowers, zygomorphic, and yet they have two lips, so they're bilabiate. Okay, another easy thing to recognize in this family. And we will look at the two-lip corolla in another family where the penstemons are. So mints, again, just think square stem, opposite leaves, gynobasic style. Whew, I know it's a mint, and the fruit's a capsule. So there you go. And sometimes these perfectly square stems are a little bit easier to see when on younger plants, but just some of them maintain that perfect square forever. So there you go. Salvia's in there. Okay. We wanted to have a look at buckwheats. So that's buckwheat. We love Eriogonums, right? We love, but what do we have in there that is interesting? We have a lot of weedy stuff in the buckwheat family. Okay, I'll come back to Orobanche because it's related to another family. Okay. Okay, let's do the buckwheats first. We will get there. Okay, Polygonaceae. So one of the most interesting characters in identifying the buckwheats is something called an ochrea. So where the leaves and attached to the stem, there's usually, and these are technically stipules, but we usually have an onion-like skin that forms a sheath around the stem. And that ochrea characteristic is probably the most diagnostic character of buckwheats, except for the one we love, which is Eriogonum. And so that is something that is sort of frustrating, but for the weedy ones, you're going to be looking for that ochrea or onion skin. So let's just take a look at that. So here are the stipules united into the onion skin. Here is an Eriogonum in the center that has bracts that look papery, but that is not the onion skin. And then you can see that the flowers are small and actinomorphic, so parts and fives. But the biggest ID character for buckwheats, the weedy ones, as I said, is that ochrea. Unfortunately, that does not occur in Eriogonum. So this would have an ochrea, okay? So that to me is the best character that we've got going. And then, okay, so now, and the fruits for all of them are achenes, ovary superior, so yeah. But in the flower of Eriogonums, we do have tepals, and I should have mentioned that when we first started, but pretty simple otherwise. All right, we wanted to go back to the plantains, right? Because that's what happened to, and grasses. So let's stop here at grasses. So what are the characters that would separate out a grass from the sedge? First of all, we have hollow stems, swollen nodes, leaves instead of being 3-ranked are 2-ranked here. We have the spikelets as the flowers, and each spikelet has one or more florets. But some of the interesting things is that the sheath is generally open in grasses, so you can pull it away from the stem. So again, where the base of the leaf wraps around the stem, you can pull it apart. And then you're going to have to pay quite a bit of attention to each spikelet and the florets, and we'll take a look at that. But here is just as a quick ID, grasses have an open sheath, and you can see that on the left there, you can see where it's splitting, so you could pull that leaf away. Stems are round and hollow, not triangular like sedges. And then there's often accessory parts like ligules, again, where the leaf wraps around the stem. You may or may not have ligules, and then the inflorescence with the spikelets have florets, and you need to know it's the glume and the lemmas, and we can go into that more detail at another time, but that's very important. each floret is you have a basal gloom, and then what you're going to look at are the lemma and the palleas here, and you're going to be looking at the number of nerves and a lot of different things for grass identification. So here's just a Bootaloo. Okay, we mentioned the Plantagenaceae. So remember, years ago, the Scrophulariaceae was where genus Penstemon was, but due to, again, molecular evidence, it's now put into the Plantagenaceae. So what's cool about Penstemons? For one thing, we have, again, two-lipped flowers. So they're bilabiate flowers. So again, you're going to only be able to do one line through the center to get two mirror images. The upper lip is usually two-lobed. The lower is three-lobed. We have 4 stamens in Penstemons, and we also have a sterile stamen called a staminode. Ovary is superior, fruits a capsule. So let's take a look. Some of the things that are in here, you can have actinomorphic flowers in genus Veronica, but I'm just talking about the Penstemons right now. So again, they are bilaterally symmetric. You can see the upper and the lower lip. You're going to have to pay attention in ID to sometimes the characters of the staminode. This is Penstemon grahamii, a really cool plant that straddles the Colorado Utah border. Okay, so what happened when Scroffs got messed around with? We moved out the Orobunk, the broom rapes have been moved, and they're into their own family as well. So someone had mentioned that one. So let's go back to that. And Mimulus, or actually it's a different genus now. So these were all, Mimulus is now the, yes?
Don't know if we can do another one.
Okay.
We're at noon, but I happen to have a picture of the sterile staminode.
Okay.
In my thing. Well, we appreciate you so much, and this is so much information. We are recording, of course, and we'll share that, and hopefully we'll be able to get back together with you in the summer. And folks, if you haven't already received the great resource of the book, you will get it. Before you exit, just scroll back up in the chat and make sure that you clicked on things that came up in the chat so they're open on your personal computer. Including, we found the PDF copy of this book on the BLM website. So
Okay.
you might want to grab that. What we didn't find, Carol, was where to do the hard order. So the hard copy order. So we'll follow up with that after.
Right. And again, if you get frustrated doing that way, you can ask just C. Dawson at blm.gov. C. Dawson at blm.gov. I'll be happy to send you new copies. If you ever get frustrated and you can't get a hold of them, I can always have them sent out. All you have to do is give me your address. And so that's our backwards way of doing it. And again, a new version with a couple of corrections hopefully is available in February. We just sent it out to print, so a couple of these corrections will be made.
All right, well, thank you so much. Have a wonderful weekend, folks. And email I just put in there, it's cdawson, CDAWSON at blm.gov.